Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about NLP and more in particular a technique that is basic to NLP called anchoring, because it's a very simple technique within NLP, but when you apply it to the Enneagram, it's actually kind of gently powerful and quite useful. What Bandler and Grinder, the guys who founded NLP, began to identify and call this sort of thing is anchoring. And what they meant by that term was that there were various ways that you could communicate that symbolically indicated an internal state. So, for instance, if you've been talking about choice Y for a little while, and as you did, I was gesturing this way, and then we began talking about the Green Bay Packers for a little while, and then I went back and I did this again, you might immediately think of choice Y. You know, it might just come back to you. And anchoring goes on all the time, just as pacing and mirroring does. And it's a part of good communication in another way, another aspect of good communication. But what the guys who founded NLP did was to kind of codify that as well, make it explicit, and to take it a little bit further in a very useful way, I think. What they began to do was to simply ask people for their total experience of a particular state that they went into, or in the dilemma that Carl Rogers was talking about, you might ask the person to describe choice X in very great detail and then deliberately anchor it. And you could do it by gesturing in the air, or you could do it with a touch, for instance, which is what we'll do. And you can do it with a combination of things as well. But what you want to do is set up a kind of circuit where when you later reproduce this touch, just as when Rogers later produced this gesture, the association comes back and the state comes back. And their thesis was pretty much that when somebody is having a problem, usually they experience their resources as being someplace else. You know, if I'm depressed, my capacity for happiness at that particular time is elsewhere, let's say. If I'm feeling weak, the strengths that I regularly demonstrate are seemingly lost to me at that time. And they were sort of positing that neurologically, you know, these things were just in kind of different places at different times. And so what they started to experiment with, and what worked out very well, was getting together limited stuck states or problems or difficulties on one side, and they would anchor them. They would get a description, a sensory-based description of what the whole thing was like. In other words, what do you see, what do you hear, what do you feel when you're having this problem that you'd like to change, or this difficulty. And then they would kind of anchor it with a touch. They would pair it with a touch. And the tendency later, then, when you went back and you touched the person in the same place, often with the same expression on your face and the same tonality maybe, is that the problem state they had described earlier would come flooding back to them. And then as you ask the person, you might also ask the person what in their experience is the opposite of being depressed. What is the opposite of this state over here? And then they might begin to tell you in detail what it's like on the few afternoons a week when they're happy. And you begin to isolate that and over-focus on it to almost compensate for the other. And you just insist that they stay on the happy part in this case. And then you anchor that over here. You do the same thing. You get a good strong anchor for it, and you get all of the sensory components.